Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life, a podcast about soundtracks, music, and movies. Each episode features a guest and focuses on a specific soundtrack and the personal stories connected to it. Now here's your host, Ryan Pack.
Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life. I'm Ryan Pack. Brandice, Nicole, and I would like to thank you for listening to our podcast. It's been a really eventful year for us. First, we won a podcast sponsorship from Racket and Stir. Then we were named one of the top 50 podcasts to check out in May and June from Podchaser. On top of that, I was given the honor to guest host the podcast Feedback with Earbuds earlier this month. We've also launched a Patreon at patreon.com/soundtrackyourlife if you'd like to get early access to episodes, ad-free episodes, and special episode exclusives. We'll be dropping an exclusive episode before the end of the year. Thanks go out to David of the Vinyl Score YouTube channel and Paolo of the Song Will Go On podcast for supporting our Patreon. We're planning on finishing the year strong. We have some great guests lined up, and we also have our holiday episode. But today, we're going to look back at some of the great episodes from earlier this year. It's our B-Sides episode, and we have some clips that didn't fit in their original episodes. I'd like to thank all of our guests for their time this year. We've had some really great interviews. To kick things off, we're going to go back to our second anniversary episode with Craig Wedren back on July 25th. Craig Wedren has had such an interesting career in film and TV, and he was part of my first concert experience ever. He and I talk about him performing Walking After You with the Foo Fighters on Letterman, and growing up with Dave Grohl in the DC punk and hardcore scene. For the longest time, I only had a promo single for the Foo Fighters' "Walking After You" song, which I had the promo single because my sister used to work at the label, and I didn't have any credits, and I didn't realize you were on the song. I knew that you were in the Letterman performance.
Am I on the recording? I truly don't remember whether I'm on the proper recording or whether I just did the background vocals for Letterman. I don't remember. I remember the Letterman experience. I can vouch for that. And the other, I don't know.
According to Wikipedia, you're on the song.
I may be. I just don't remember. I was doing that was like a blackout time in my life. It was like after Shudder to Think, but before soundtrack stuff had really kicked in. You know, there would be like one movie a year or like maybe two, and I was doing a lot of not a lot, but I remember doing different recordings. I was very open to like trying stuff. So I remember doing a session with the Verve Pipe, like for their record. I remember doing Letterman with Foos. But it's all sort of a blur of a free fall moment where I can't remember the details.
No worries.
I could check with Dave, but I bet he probably doesn't remember.
Because I was like, what do you call what you do on that song? In the performance, you're more harmonizing, but at least what I think is your vocals on the recording, it's almost like they're just kind of using your voice as an instrument, which is really cool.
I'll have to listen to it. Where is it on Spotify or is it like
you can find it on Spotify
YouTube?
now. They did like a big B-sides dump on Spotify, and it's like the Walking After You single version.
It's a beautiful, beautiful song. I love that song. I love his ballads.
I do too. I was like, I really wish she did more like sappy Dave songs.
Yeah. I feel that way too. Oh, okay. Here it is. I'll take a listen.
But I remember like reading up on it. And I think I was just kind of interested on like where'd they record that and who's playing on that song? Because I think it was a transitional time for them as well.
Yeah. I think that's right. It makes sense because there were more. I feel like there were more just sort of sweet, simple straight, ballady songs early on
Yeah.
without
It's like,
the muscle.
yeah, the softer side of Dave.
Mm-hmm. Has a really pretty voice.
Yeah, I love that Letterman performance. I remember watching it and being like, it's Craig.
World domination. Dave, so Dave and I know each other from the DC punk scene because Shudder, he was in the band Dane Bramage, and then he was in Scream at the same time that Shudder to Think was doing stuff. So we would always go see any band he was playing in, just because he was such just a powerhouse. And I remember he gave me like a cassette of like these demos that he had done. I guess it was after Nirvana, or maybe it was during Nirvana. I don't know. That became the first Foo Fighters record, and I remember listening to him being like, "This is awesome! It's like Steve Miller Band of like alternative music, or again, like going back to this idea of something slightly sweeter and softer and more melodic, But it had more of his and all of our more overt kind of classic rock radio love in it, which I always really like in his music.
Yeah, to go back to that first tour, I feel like it was a difficult experience for everyone because I think the audience expectations were just so all over the place.
And you were still getting a lot of knuckleheads like left over from Nirvana,
Yeah.
who were not necessarily there to like listen to music.
Yeah, like I think half the audience wasn't even there really to see Foo Fighters. They're just hoping Dave would just talk about Nirvana for an hour and a half.
Yeah. To his credit, he just did his music and continues to do so.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Knock wood.
So Craig, what is your favorite soundtrack and why do you connect with that piece of music?
Ever? Like any soundtrack?
Yeah, any soundtrack.
Well, the first one that comes to mind is it's pretty obvious, but it's Saturday Night Fever. I don't know when I was 8 or however old I was when it came out, if I understood or quite appreciated what a soundtrack was, but the music, mostly Bee Gees songs on that soundtrack and the way that it imprinted on me when I saw the movie, it speaks to that really unique synergy of music and story that is greater than the sum of its parts. And it's so deep in my DNA before I was aware of like scores. I mean, I suppose I was listening to the Star Wars score, at the same time. But it's still just such a cornerstone. I still listen to it. I still look to it. I still refer to it. And it still inspires me, even though I know it's basically an album of Bee Gees songs. If we're talking about like score, that's a tougher question. There's so many. I love so many Hitchcock scores. I love so many Fellini scores. I love so many David Lynch scores. I don't know. It's interesting because I don't listen to a ton of instrumental score music. I I reference it. I'll listen to it when I'm working on something, but it's not usually something like I have friends who are composers who really listen to mostly scores. But I think just because of my band background, and because of coming up kind of raised on the radio, I still tend to pay closer attention to, in the loosest sense, popular music, into which I include like experimental and electronic and jazz and, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Then film scores. I try and pay attention to scores when I'm watching something, but I'm such a movie fan that usually I forget. Usually I stop listening within 5 minutes, unless something is blowing my mind. I really appreciated the Northman score. I really appreciated, what else have I seen recently? I feel like there's been a bunch of really good scores, but of course, now that we're discussing it, I can't remember any of them.
Next, we have Scott Interrante from the This Is the Greatest Song I've Ever Heard in My Entire Life podcast. He was our guest on our October 10th music and lyrics episode. And in this clip, Scott, Nicole, and I talk about the odd career of the band Sugar Ray.
Another tangent, but maybe for a future episode. Have you ever seen the film Father's Day? It's a 90s film.
Is that the Billy Crystal, Robin Williams
Billy
one?
Crystal, Robin Williams are both told that they might have a son, the same son, this woman that they both used to date. And she said, it might be your son.
It's a reverse Mamma Mia.
It's a reverse Mamma Mia. And she says, oh, my son is missing. Can you go find him? So they team up to go find him. He is on the road following Sugar Ray, the actual band Sugar Ray. And this is like before Fly. They're just like a new metal band from California, but they're in it. Mark McGrath has like lines of dialogue. It's crazy.
No way.
Yeah.
He's also in Lady Dynamite, the Maria Bamford show.
Oh, wow.
Mark McGrath?
Yeah, he's like, he kind of bookends the first season, and he's like, oh, I hate you. And she's like, why did we do something sexually? And he's like, ew, gross.
Does he play himself?
Yes.
That's great.
I love that. Maybe Mark McGrath is cooler than I thought.
Like he has a little bit of like self-awareness that we didn't know about.
Yeah, like he seems pretty chill with his like public perception. So, all right, Mark McGrath, you win this round. I'm gonna forgive you for making Fly so ubiquitous during high school.
It's a great song, though.
I resent more like Every Morning and Sometime or Someday.
God,
Someday.
Those are You're right. Those are objectively worse.
I think all four of the songs, the other one being When It's Over, I think all four of them are perfect pop songs. But
I'm trying to like sing them in my head, and they become like one Voltron song. Like I can't differentiate them if I try to think about them at the same time.
Yeah.
Like I understand why they were popular.
Yes.
Like they are undeniably catchy songs. But I also kind of feel like they just filled the void of Brad Noel passing away.
That's jeez, Brian. Way to bring it down.
Is that not what?
No, it might be true.
Did they not fill that void? The kind of sublime
vibe. Yeah, I think you feel that maybe more because we're Californian too, that there was a sort of a place to step into. It's kind of like the whole post-grunge scene after Kurt Cobain died, and then you get, Bush.
Yeah. But what's crazy too, and now I don't know why, this is just a podcast about Sugar Ray. But
fine, we'll cut this out.
But those songs, which are really good and radio friendly and like pop songs, the rest of the albums are like really bad nu metal, sound nothing like them. And those four songs are like split onto 3 different albums, and everything around them is like garbage. And I don't understand what was happening. It was just like, oh hey, today we're gonna make a hit, and then the rest of the time we're gonna make this other crap. Like, I don't know what were they doing. It's crazy.
I assume it was like the labels, like, we need a single, and they're like, here's the
I
catchiest
guess,
thing
but
we could come up with,
it's
and they're
just
like,
crazy
oh,
that
wow.
they could just like turn it on like that, you know?
Yeah,
It makes me kind of curious of what a Sugar Ray concert kind of sounds like, if it's like mostly new metal and then those 4 songs at the end.
I think
I
it
don't
sounds
know.
like the sound of screeching, drunk, middle-aged women that have had too many Bud Light.
Nicole, let's stop talking about this, or it's going to become the Listener Dare episode that we have to go to a Sugar Ray concert.
Oh, no, I don't want that. Maybe I do. Maybe
I'd
they're
go.
at the fair.
Yeah.
I mean, they're from over here, so
I know.
I'm sure that we could catch them whenever.
At Knott's Berry Farm.
At Knott's Berry Farm.
Yeah.
There we go. Brought it back to the movie.
Amazing.
From our May 23rd episode on The Crow, our guest was Colin Jackson Brown of the Free With This Month's Issue and We Dig Music podcasts. Colin, Brandice, and I discussed the many failed attempts to reboot The Crow. So it's funny if you look up The Crow on Wikipedia and, you know, you kind of look at the length of the page, the longest section is on how many times they've talked about rebooting this film.
Yes. Yeah, and failed. I mean, none of the sequels did well. The TV series I've not seen and is apparently very bad. I'd be happy if they did do a version and it was good. I'd be perfectly fine with that. But I don't know. It's not a character that's really stayed in like the public imagination. So you would have so much resistance from most of the people that did know and like the original.
Mm-hmm.
And then people that didn't know and like the original, you're going to get a lot of sort of basically indifference from them. They'll be like, never even heard of it. Why are you remaking that?
Yeah, you kind of have to have like a nice middle ground there because, like you're saying, the hardcore fans for the original, especially in, reverence to Brandon Lee, are not going to be happy about a remake there. And you're right, like nobody else really knows about this character or that comic, or would care to see like a remake. So it's kind of like that middle ground.
Yeah, I think the closest they ever got to it was Jason Momoa was rumoured to be taking on the role a few years ago, but then he dropped out of that, so that obviously sort of stopped in its tracks. But that could have got traction because he's very, very popular and generally pretty good. I mean, he even made Aquaman interesting, and Aquaman is one of the worst superheroes that there has ever been.
Yeah, it's a lot to get over in terms of being Aquaman. Like the whole underwater thing is a lot to get over, but you're right. Like attaching like a big name, very popular movie star is probably the only hope at getting sort of mainstream people to be invested in a character they know nothing about, and he would be a good choice for that.
Yeah.
But don't you think his body type is a little too weird for
too muscly?
Like he's too muscly for a guy who, was just in a band. I mean, of course, he could be muscly and in a band, I guess, but
only if you're in Manowar.
Yeah.
I mean, he's always been muscly though. So if you just take it as, he was living his life, didn't become a movie star, and then he had this whole revenge arc story. Like, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there are muscly people out there who experience tragedy too.
Well, he wasn't I don't think he was a musician in the original comics, and the sequels I don't think went with that. I mean, in Crow City of Angels, he was like a showbiz magician-y type bloke. He keeps doing card tricks and stuff, which is just utterly ridiculous.
That's also a sign of the times. There was like a moment where magicians were like the it thing before vampires.
Yeah, well, one of the other sequels had David Boreanaz, didn't it, who played Angel. So there's the vampire connection.
Yep, see, there you go. From the 90s to the 2000s, we're checking all those boxes.
As of 2 days ago, it sounds like they're about to announce another attempt at a reboot, so that's why I brought it up.
What's the news on that one? Is it anybody that's connected to it? Or?
Colin Hardy as the director,
Okay.
but people are not sure if Momoa is still attached.
Okay, cool. Well, I will remain open-minded, and I will check it out. And hopefully it's more like the first one than City of Angels or any of the others that I've not seen yet, and probably won't bother with.
Well, and in addition to someone having to fill the shoes of Brandon Lee, which is impossible to do, when that actor was
Yeah.
no longer with us, and the way that he was no longer with us, that's a tall order to fill. But also, what about the soundtrack for the remake, considering that, the soundtrack we're discussing for the original, 3 times platinum, kind of a big deal. So trying to follow
there's
that
no
up.
way that's going to hold a candle to the soundtrack.
Yeah, absolutely.
No way.
I mean, I'd give it a go at putting one together, but yeah. Trying to think which current bands. There's a band who I think are from LA called Glare, who are an awesome sort of goth, sort of synth wave sort of band. If they were on there, that'd be utterly fantastic. Are you guys both in LA?
Relatively. I'm in LA.
More or less, yeah.
Right.
I'm a little south of LA.
You should definitely try and see Glare live. It's Glaare. Particularly you, Brandice, because digging 9 Inch Nails, you'll probably like them. It was one of my favourite albums of last year. And you've got much more chances to see them live than I have.
I'll definitely put that on my list. But
Yeah.
do you even think that if it's rebooted and they're doing the soundtrack today, do you think that they would keep it in that genre? I mean, do you think the film would still be goth? Do you think the soundtrack would still be like that industrial rock moment?
I don't know.
I think it'd be more new metal.
I don't think it would be new metal. I think what my main thoughts are is they wouldn't be making it for me. So, then they're not going to do focus groups of 40-year-old beardy music geeks from England, are they? So, they're going to be making it for the kids. So I'm out of touch with that kind of stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even think that the whole goth and industrial rock and all of that even registers. I feel like it would be a completely different tone with totally new genres and like a new sort of scene, honestly.
Potentially. I mean, you've got people like there are still elements of goth in the mainstream. I mean, the House's album last year, which Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross produced, and was absolutely amazing. Best pop album of last year and probably the last few years, is incredibly goth. So, if you've got someone as mainstream as Housey doing that, then there are going to be some of the youth who are into it. So if they aim at those, I might like it. But if they don't, if it's all Machine Gun Kelly and stuff like that, to pull a name out of the air of someone I've never listened to, but have heard his name. Oh, I'm just aging as I do this podcast today. Yeah. It's not for me to decide, I've still got this I've still got this soundtrack. It's not going away. This is one of the things you shouldn't get annoyed when people make new things or new versions of things. There's nothing wrong with remakes, as long as you've still got your original one that you can listen to. It's like when a band changes their style and puts out a new album, and the fans are all like, oh, I hate this, I want you to play the early stuff. You've still got the early stuff. You can still go back and listen to it. So just listen to your old stuff from when you were a kid, and shut up, old man, basically, is what I'm saying to myself.
I was going to say, I could see things going hip-hop on the soundtrack. Maybe not like what we listen to as mainstream hip-hop, but I've been seeing a lot of like Joy Division references popping up with rappers.
Yeah.
So Danny Brown,
Yes.
he released an album called Atrocity Exhibition, which is obviously a Joy Division song. Vince Staples, his first full length, it's called Summertime '06, but the artwork is a play on the Unknown Pleasures artwork.
Oh,
So I
okay,
feel
cool.
like Joy Division is kind of permeating kind of like this. I don't want to call them more experimental rappers because I don't think they're super experimental, but they're definitely different from mainstream rap, right? Like
Yeah.
they kind of take a lot of more like electronic elements into their sound, and they're a little bit
Yeah.
more adventurous rap, I think is the right way to put it. So I could see them
Cool.
doing something like that, not like Drake and like The Weeknd, but
Oh God.
like some of these like darker sort of rappers, doing something like that, or maybe even something kind of like Judgment Night-ish.
Judgment Night. Yeah. Now that's a soundtrack. Have you done an episode on that one yet?
No, but I'm very excited to do one when someone is ready to do it.
Be well up for doing that at some point, and I'm sure Ian would as well.
That can be arranged. I mean, that's a huge soundtrack, and
yeah,
I know so many people who know the soundtrack and have never watched the movie.
I've seen it once about probably 15 years ago and don't ever need to see it again.
Yeah, I think Lily and Hannah have the same sort of feeling about that. And last but not least, we're going to go back to our first episode of 2022 back on January 10th. Our guest was John Munson of Semisonic, and I was able to tell him about how seeing one of his other bands, The New Standards, kind of kept on popping up while I was dating my wife. So I would like to tell you a little story about when I was dating my wife. So we were maybe like a month into dating, and you guys, The New Standards, were playing in LA. So you guys were going to play at Largo. And, typically I would just go with friends, but no one was like available to go. So I asked this girl I was dating if she wanted to go see this cover band, which featured this guy from Semisonic. And my wife is pretty much, born and raised in LA. She lived out of state a couple times for like grad school, but she's pretty much an LA girl. So I was like, well, this is going to be a very fun, like Minnesota day for you, because that's where I'm from. And, she had a great time. And in the middle of the show, you guys brought out a comedian named Mary Mack.
Oh, Mary. It's the best.
And so, Mary goes up there and she's talking about meat raffles and Lyme disease. And, it's very funny, but very like Minnesota specific humor.
She's all that.
Yeah. and in my mind, I'm just like, oh, is this just too much Minnesota all at one time? And so a couple weeks later, my wife has a friend at work who's getting married. And she asks my wife, like, hey, I'm thinking about getting a comedian to like do a bit at my reception. What do you think? And so my wife told me about it. I was like, I think that's a terrible idea, because I'm just imagining, like an Andrew Dice Clay sort of figure, just making a bunch of like wedding night jokes.
Right. Trashing the occasion.
Yeah. And what I didn't know is that the comedian that she had in mind was Mary Mack.
Awesome.
So Mary Mack ended up doing 5 to 10 minutes at my wife's friend's reception.
Love it. Was she funny?
Of course she was funny. She's Mary Mack. And so it was weird, like this one New Standards show just kind of popping up in our relationship over and over again, with Mary Mack. And then when it came time to propose, I was trying to figure out what would be like an appropriate way to do it. And so I ended up proposing to my wife at Thomas Lowry Park back in downtown Minneapolis.
Oh, where now? I'm trying to think where that park is now. Where exactly is that?
It's across the street from the Sculpture Garden, I think.
Loring Park.
Loring Park? I thought it was Lowry Park.
No, it's Loring Park. That's a lovely little spot. Yeah, it's quite a beautiful little garden and pond and stuff, right? I'm sure that's the park that you're referring to. It's got to be.
It says Thomas Lowry Park.
They maybe changed the name. It's always been. I mean, you're going to send me a map of it, but if it's you definitely pin it and send it to me. But you would know where you proposed, and I'm not gonna second guess you at all.
Yeah, I'll send you a pin.
Yeah, send me a pin. There's another comedian, not to get off track, but there's another comedian who now lives in LA, but who's from Duluth, Minnesota, and her name is Maria Bamford. Are you familiar with her?
Yep.
She's collaborated with me and my friend John Moe, who's a really funny comedian and author from the Twins. He's actually from Washington, but I think he pretty much identifies as a Twin Cityan at this point, or maybe even a St. Paulite. She is straight up so funny, and she's got the same quality as Mary Mack, in that, I mean, if you're from Minnesota, you can hear that she's from here. She has the accent of a Minnesotan, and then also her sensibilities and the way she speaks about her family relationships and stuff like that is just so Minnesota. And she came and did a show with John and I about a month and a half ago called Wits at the Fitzgerald Theater, and oh my God, she was just such a crack up. I just love her. And I love Mary too, and I haven't seen her for ages, and I can't wait to see her again now, thinking about her.
Yeah, so we went to go see Mary do some stand-up sometime pre-COVID, and we were just kind of chatting with her backstage, and this guy kept walking by us, and it kind of kept on doing like this double take, and then he finally walked up to her and said, "Maria Bamford?"
Oh, funny. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. I don't think they look that much alike, but they kind of do now that I think about it.
And we're all just like, But yeah, I told Mary that I saw her with you guys, and she just has the nicest things to say about the three of you.
She's gold. And I'm not surprised that she lied and was complimentary about us.
She's a crack up.
She is. She's a straight up crack up. She's so visual. There's an aspect of her comedy which is really visual, which is true of many comedians, obviously. And so she was working on this radio show, and she did this whole kind of costume gag where she dressed up like a janitor, and she was kind of like the Jan from the custodial staff or whatever, and she'd come out, and it was like a very Carol Burnett kind of gag, in a way. And I love Carol Burnett. I think she's so funny. But the radio folks were like, "What is this shit she's coming on?" And she's like doing this visual humor, but it's a radio show. Nobody can see her. So she kind of got booted off the show, which I thought was a disaster. And she should have been on in spite of everything, because anybody can radio listeners can hear people laughing, and if you hear people laughing, then you yourself will laugh, and it's winning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, she's gold.
Yeah, I just remember telling her that my wife and I were planning to go to the Minnesota State Fair, because my wife had never been, and she'd seen Andrew Zimmern rave about it, so she wanted to go. And Mary was like, "Oh, I love the State Fair. I go, multiple times a year." And she's like, "Maybe I'll see you there." And it was just so funny that we had just met her, and she's like, "Maybe I'll see you." Usually when you meet someone that's a comedian or someone that you think is semi-famous, they probably don't want to see you again. But she's like, "Oh yeah, if you see me, say hi."
Let's admit that's a little bit of a Minnesota thing, right? I do think there's people say Minnesota nice is all jive and whatever, but there's a little something to it, I think, in some cases. Now, I'm looking at this map right here, and I'm wondering what park across the street from the Sculpture Garden you went to. Oh, I see Thomas Lowry Park. So were you up on the hill? Were you up on the hill behind the Walker Art Center?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at a map of the Twin Cities and you see the much larger park that has 2 ponds.
Yeah, I see that.
That's Loring Park. But Thomas Lowry Park is up there. It's in that area called like Lowry Hill, and it's up on the big kind of fancy. It's also lovely, but it's much smaller park above the Walker Art Center. And I bet it was a very pretty spot to propose, and obviously it worked. So there's the proof in the pudding.
Yeah, it worked, even though I actually tried to get you guys to help out. I actually talked to Chan about it.
Oh, and, did you?
I did. I reached out. And the weekend I picked didn't work out because you guys were doing Rock the Garden.
Oh.
And he's like, you can do it at Rock the Garden. And I was like, I don't think my wife's going to like that.
No, I think that was smart.
It was the weekend of the Replacements reunion in St. Paul.
Oh God, that was a big deal. Did you get over to see that?
Well, that's why we were there. In the first place.
That was a big to do. Well, that was a hard ticket, so good on you for getting those.
Yeah, and I was like, well, I guess since we're here, we should do some other memorable stuff.
Like get engaged.
Yeah. But I was trying to get you guys to kind of bookend our like courtship.
Well, geez, I feel sad that we let you down, but on the other hand, it all seems to have worked out pretty well.
No, it's worked out great, but I was like, well, if I ever get to talk to them, I'm going to tell them the story.
I'm glad you did. And I'm going to call up Chan right now and say, God, I can't believe you didn't figure out a way to come through for Ryan. And he'll look at me, scratch his head.
But I'm excited about when you guys can come back out this way. We had a lot of fun at that show.
Right on, man. Well, we loved playing. That was a big to do. I mean, I think we got a lot of our pals to kind of come out for it. It was really fun. Very memorable.
Yeah, and I think I was only familiar with your songs. I didn't know that you guys kind of did this variety show format, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of can turn into that. it can kind of it can kind of go off the rails pretty quick, but yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible. You guys had John C. Reilly, Mary Mack, and Dan Wilson.
Yeah, did Paul Tompkins make it down that time too? I was trying to remember if Amy Mann and Paul, I think they were at a different event that I did. Also,
I think they were part of your Wits LA shows.
Yeah, that's right. Those guys they're good pals too.
Thanks for listening. Like I said, we've got some really strong episodes to close out 2022, and we're hoping to have more great guests lined up for 2023. Please subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, or support us by joining the Patreon. Hit us up on Twitter at @soundtrack_your and on Instagram at SoundtrackCast. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a really exciting guest, so tune in then.
Thanks for joining us this week on Soundtrack Your Life. Make sure to visit our website, soundtrackyourlife.net, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too.